Welcome to the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission meeting for February 25th, 2014. Commissioner Planzer is participating remotely because of geographic distance. And this, I remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded. Are there any comments on the agenda?
No. Adopt it.
Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. You have the minutes of February 11th. Are there any questions or corrections?
I would make a motion to accept the minutes of February 11th, 2014, as drafted.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Roll call.
All right. We have to do a roll call. Thank you. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. May I have a motion to ratify the warrant of February 19th, 2014?
I'll make a motion to ratify the February 19th, 2014 warrant.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Is there public comment at this time? Hearing none, why don't we move into the Master Plan and Sustainability Program update?
Well, as you know, Dan and Arthur, we had a very good meeting upstairs. Bill Richardson from Jacobs is here tonight to give us an update on the master plan. But I think one of the comments from the meeting is we would like to try to get a little more discussion between now and the next one. So we'll work to how we can arrange that. So, Bill, you want to give us an update?
Mr. Richardson, why don't you come up here so your voice goes into the speakerphone as well as into the would you identify yourself, sir, please?
Bill Richardson from Jacobs Engineering, the Master Plan Project Manager for Jacobs. And as Tom mentioned, we just had a very packed discussion group agenda that we managed to get through with, I think, the beginnings of some very good discussion that we'd like to continue, perhaps in a different type of format or a different forum to facilitate a little bit more give and take. We frankly ran out of time because we had so much to get through. And we'd like to give all of the working group members and those commission members who weren't able to participate an opportunity to comment on the material we have, and then to think about perhaps a different format as we go into the alternatives, where it's more of a charrette-type workshop, where we sit around and have a more freewheeling discussion on what the options are before we actually go back and write up what those alternatives might be and what the cost implications might be. But basically, the master plan is on time and it's on schedule, and we're hoping to be as flexible as necessary to make the final phase be as productive as we need to.
So to kind of cover for those folks who weren't there, we discussed the inventory analysis, existing conditions, forecast analysis, some environmental highlights.
And the trends, the industry trends that set the basis for what may or may not be happening here in the future, yes.
What about the website? Will we be getting the information out on the website shortly? Yes.
One of the commitments we made to the working group was to get the printed material out to all of the members, get whatever written comments they might have back into that material, and then post that onto the website. So that'll be up on the airport website probably mid-March, I would say.
Great.
Those would be the first 5 chapters, plus the appendices.
Lots of reading.
Lots of reading,
Can
Mr. Gasparo will attest.
As we discussed previously, can we put up executive summary or a paragraph or 2 about each so that folks know what's in there, and then they can either go through a table of contents or something to find what they'd like to find?
In especially chapters 4 and 5, chapter 4 being the aviation trends, what's happening in the industry, there's a bit of a summary in the beginning of that chapter now, and the same for the forecasts. Chapter 4 is the trends, chapter 5 is the forecast. Both of those summaries can be put up on the website, as well as for the environmental and the existing facilities.
I know if there's a way to put bookmarks in there or something by, subject matter or the paragraphs or sections or something so that people can do a quick reference type of thing.
Yeah, I think perhaps the table of contents, we can break up into the subchapters and the subheadings so that people can go right to those subsections that they're most interested in.
That'd be helpful. Okay.
Mr. Gaspar, do you have any comments you'd like to make about it?
I guess it's more of an inquiry, if I may, which is, I'm wondering about when we may see the financial analysis aspect. And when Steve was discussing the forecast trends, he had mentioned that they hadn't looked at other airports for comparison purposes. And I can understand that for the benchmarking related to the forecasting. But my hope is that we will indeed get that information as it relates to rates and charges and finances. And so again, I guess I'm just trying to keep that on the burner, because that's where I really am feeling a lot of pressure for us to do something.
In our discussions with the sub-consultant, PB, I believe she identified 10 other airports, if I'm not mistaken, that she was benchmarking against for rates and charges.
That's correct. And Mr. Casparo is correct that for the purposes of the employment forecasts, because Nantucket is a unique market, as Stephen explained, we didn't really try to compare Nantucket with Aspen or any of those other airports that might have two seasons, but certainly from the financial standpoint,
Well,
how they set up their
I'm sorry,
books.
go ahead.
I was just going to say that that's what the benchmarking will do, is we are comparing ourselves to not only close-by neighbors, but others.
But to the extent any of the others have been through recent master planning exercises, I assume those are public documents.
They are, yes.
And is it worth taking a look at them, as much as I said we're unique during the earlier meeting, taking a look at them to see what they're forecasting in the way of trends?
We can-
For trends for operations and employments and that kind of thing?
Certainly. We can-
Because it seems to me there are parallels with some of these airports in that respect.
Right. And I'm trying to remember, I believe it was Aspen that we recently, they recently did an update of their master plan, and we can certainly look at their forecast piece. I don't know the extent to which they got into a thorough financial business plan. I think we're going to be very unique in terms of the depth we get to in this effort here. But as Mr. Rafter just explained, the next piece from PB is going to have the benchmarking element in it. From that, then, once we've completed the alternatives and we've selected what the prioritization for those are going to be and the phasing over the next 5 to 10 years, we can then go back and apply the costs for them and see how they get prorated on an annual basis on an O&M and how that affects the bottom line, and then what the business plan will look like to support that from a sustainable perspective.
Okay.
Any questions, Ms. Planzer?
No questions.
Just an observation for the benefit of the self-preservation of the members of the commission. One of the things we talked about was trends, and I've spent a fair amount of time on this afternoon. But it was pointed out, and I think very correctly, and this is in terms of sort of creating expectations and so forth, this plan is going to end up being what it is, but there are external factors over which we don't have any control, which could have a substantial impact, usually negative, on a plan of this kind, having to do with economic conditions, world conditions, specific events. I mean, the two periods within the last 15 years or so where there's been a substantial impact, negative impact on the business were 9/11, of course, and then the recession of 2007 and following years. Some
Yes.
would argue we're not out of it yet.
Right.
And those are the kinds of things that are almost impossible to predict. So we must keep that in mind as we bring this plan to fruition.
Very good point.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
And we look forward to hearing more. Soon. The next item is pending leases and contracts. We have two from Act Surf School. Do you want to talk about them, Mr. Rafter?
Yes, one is from Act Surf School and the other is Act Surf. They're both beach licenses. One is a return from the previous year for the surf school, and the second is a request for another vehicle that would sell clothing and sundries and things of that nature. And we have a third one for World Fuel. We're asking for one more extension so that we can finalize the
Why don't we
contract.
come back to that?
Okay.
Mr. Norton, do you want to come up to the microphone, if you would, and identify yourself and sort of tell us how the season went and what you're hoping for next season?
Name's Gavin Norton. So last season was our first season just as a surf school. Went well. Well, obviously with July 4th, that kind of interrupts the season a little bit. But other than that, went really well. It was good exposure for us. It was also good for the beach, non-lifeguard beach. Having us there definitely helped out with, I think we probably did over like 50, 60 rescues during the summer. Just random people all the way down the beach. We'd usually get called. We called the town afterwards, but it was a good summer. It was fun. Can't really complain about being at the beach every day. So, worked out well.
In terms of your surf school, do you plan on changing that operation at all this summer?
I don't think so. We're not really expanding in any sort of form. We might buy a few more rental boards, but that's about it.
All right, and tell us about the other operation. It's the same entity, is it not, that's operating the second one, or is it a separate entity?
Same owners, different entity.
Different entity.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's myself and Sam Toole own both the surf school and the clothing line. So what the clothing would be is kind of, not really sure how we're going to set it up yet, but just an option to have, because there's the 3 spots. The one on the right was usually taken by the food, and we were in the middle, and then on the left there was kind of an open spot where anyone that was going to the beach kind of used. So I'm just looking at more to take up that spot more for our surf school and for the possible clothing. And at the clothing would just be kind of simple things like t-shirts, sunscreen. Like I said, we also haven't really thought it through because we don't want to overthink it before we get the okay from you guys.
One comment, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Gavin, you just need to know the town has discussed putting lifeguards on that beach this summer, too.
All right.
So hopefully we'll be doing less lifeguarding and more surf school
That'd be
business.
nice for me.
Do you have any questions?
Did we have any complaints or concerns or anything last year?
None at all, I know of, no.
Great, thanks.
I think they'd be providing a good, supplying the needs of the bathers,
I don't disagree, I just
you
was
know,
wondering.
sunscreen and clothing and things, so.
Ms. Planzer, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah.
I guess my question is with respect to the extra space. I think we have to make it clear in some way that you will not be selling food or snacks or anything of that sort out of that truck.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust my guys around it anyway, so.
Well, but I think we need to have something in writing.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the agreement, yeah.
Yeah, because obviously, while we haven't heard from them yet, I expect we'll be hearing from the food trucks, and if they know there's competition.
Yeah.
So I have another question for you, but let's take a vote on these first.
I would make a motion to approve both beach license agreements with Act Surf, with the one related to clothing, subject to no food sales.
It's fine with me.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Further discussion? Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. You have your deal. Now, my question, I don't know if you want to answer this or not. But I'm curious as to how, your perception of how it worked out there with the 2 food trucks coming and going. Was there adequate coverage? Was there inadequate coverage? Did it work out okay? I mean,
From what I heard from them is they split the days, right?
Right.
Yeah. So one got 3, one got 2. Is that what it was? Or was it?
well, they agreed on how to split it up. We told them,
Yeah.
they had to do that.
So I know Millie's was probably the least liked by everyone on the beach, including us. They had a generator on the front of their truck, which would either spit out gas or just smell, and it was extremely loud. It's just a huge thing that took up the whole front of their truck. The people, they weren't the friendliest bunch, and also they weren't the cleanliest, which was kind of a pain because they didn't bring any trash cans or anything like that. But the lobster trap guys, great guys, the Weldons, they had I think they had 2 generators, which they put behind, put a box over. It was pretty quiet. It was more beach related, where Millie's kind of would back in, either hit a post, hit a trash can, run over a bike, and then try and figure it out. So in my perspective, we all liked the lobster trap guys. They also came the days that they were supposed to. Millie's, I think, probably came 10 to 15 times during the summer. So they definitely didn't come the day they were supposed to, but the lobster trap was there every day that they were supposed to be.
Okay. All right, thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And good luck with it, again. The contract amendment with World Fuel Services?
Yes, we're asking again for just one more month extension. As you know, we selected them from proposals, but we just need to prepare and finalize negotiations and the agreement that we should have done within another month. So I'd ask the Commission's approval to extend the existing agreement with World Fuel for one more month through March 31st.
Mr. Gasparo?
I would make that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Are there any comments or just further discussion?
I wonder, what are we working out with them on the proposal?
I'm sorry?
What are we working out with them on the proposal?
It's the actual contract. The existing contract is split up differently, and we have to work out the technical agreement for the lease of the vehicles and for the supply of the fuel. So it's actual, the language
It's
with the
the
contract.
detail, the devil is in the details.
Yeah, it's a formality of having a written contract that specifies what's in the proposal. They'll do what's in the proposal.
Okay.
Which is the same thing that you're doing with Jacobs on the engineering
Correct,
contract.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor. How do you vote, Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you. We head into the pending matters.
Pending matters, there's no real change on the MOU procurement. However, we did discuss with the Finance Department their interaction and how that would work similar to it, because there's a relationship between the procurement and the finance. And again, we discussed a small MOU with detailed procedures that would be signed off by the airport and the applicable town department or departments, whether it be procuring and/or finance, because it's all related and involved. So we met last Friday with Deb Dilworth, and they're in agreement. So we're moving it along slowly, but we're going to be starting to put together detailed procedures.
And keep going.
Manager's report on projects. The FBO is progressing. We expect to be operational by mid-March with a grand opening tentatively scheduled for April 18th, the weekend before Daffodil. We're probably going to be moving into the building within the next week or two, getting things ready, taking it through its paces, and then opening up for the general public. We will also be scheduling open houses for the public to come out and view the facility, as well as tours for the local dignitaries and things. The real...
I'm sorry, are there any questions or comments on that in terms of we talked this morning about the idea of just having very low-key open houses when people could come and kick the tires, so to speak. Nothing special, and then whatever's planned for the grand opening, we'll hear about later.
Yeah, nothing huge, but it's more getting the word out into the aviation community and making sure that they know this is what they're going to be coming up to this summer. So, on the next item, we have the reels and pappies for runway 1533. There's a pre-bid meeting tomorrow with construction expected to begin towards the end of March, so that's good news on that.
How long will that take?
I don't know, but normally it's a fairly quick project, maybe a few weeks or so. But I'll find out tomorrow at the pre-bid meeting. The carbon neutral program, the ESCO proposals, as I mentioned before, were received, and March 5th, they'll be conducting interviews with the companies and proceeding with that. We had a bit of an issue.
Who's on the selection committee for that?
Volpe, the state, NOAA. I'll let you take it
If you
from
wouldn't
there.
mind, Mr. Carberg.
I can't remember all of the names. Oh, Noah Carberg, Airport Environmental Coordinator. I believe it's Tom Mahoney and Denise Garcia and Katie Service, Chris Willenborg at Mass DOT, David Arthur at Volpe, I believe David Duncan and Corley Cooper at Volpe, Heidi Bauer, Town of Nantucket Procurement Officer, George Aronson, the Senior Consultant. Tom and I are staying off of the actual selection committee.
Okay, thank you. When do you expect to have a decision made? By the end of March, maybe? Excuse me for making you get up again.
I believe the end of March timeline is one of the things we're going to be discussing on the 5th.
Thank you.
Next, I've put this under project updates. As the commissioners may be aware, we had a pipe break in the ARF building, creating a very large leak and quite a bit of damage. We've filed an insurance claim. The adjuster has been out, and today they had an engineer out looking at it. It involved a heating system on the second floor that broke and leaked down into the first floor men's and ladies' locker room, as well as the first aid room, the foam storage area, and another storage area that we had. So there were a lot of ceiling tiles, and it also overflowed the sewer system, so it was not clean water that was being leaked there. So we had to have a cleaning company come in and do some cleaning work as well.
Was this weather-related, or was it just a failure of the
A
system?
combination. It was weather-related. It had an issue, and it froze up, but system-wise, it did not have a system that could announce and tell us. If it had a system a remote system, would have notified one of our maintenance guys that there was a problem. They could have gotten out there and hopefully preempted some of this. We're in the process of procuring that. It's a combination of the system in the ARF building and the terminal. There's some compatibility and incompatibility working through those, but so it froze up, and we had to get the heat fixed as well. So weather-related, and as I say,
And it was built by the lowest bidder.
it was the lowest bidder, and of course, we opted out for not having the remote monitoring type thing. So next, we have the formerly used defense site update. We've signed a contract with Weston, and I haven't even had a chance to read an email. I got it back today, but they, I believe, are coming out within the next week to perform the work. They were out last week to look and evaluate and give us the proposal. So hopefully we'll have that work begin within the next week on the pile that is on the airport property within the fence. On the RFP, RFQ update side, the control tower is advertised. It'll be in the I&M Thursday. It's on goods and services, and I believe it's on the town website as well. We also received notice from the FAA that an RFQ will suffice, and we don't have to go through the full RFP process. So that will cut a few weeks off the time frame, which is good because we need that time. We're also working on contracts with the two firms that we selected, the engineering, Jacobs, and Fuel Ascent. So we're in the process of preparing those contracts. The ATM RFP is still being worked on, and again, we may or may not combine it with the town. We're not sure if we're going to go ahead of them or wait for them. I'd like to get a sense from the commission this evening, before I proceed, about an RFP that I'd like to create for advertising to be able to sell space in the new building as well as the terminal. And I understand in the past there was a concern that we didn't want it to become industrial looking. We wanted to make it the look and feel of Nantucket and the island, and I fully appreciate that, but I think there may be some opportunity for revenue there as long as we hold them strictly to our approval of anything that be placed on the walls. So I'd just like to get a sense from the commissioners if that's something we should consider. Thoughts?
Mr. Gasparo?
I'd prefer not, to be honest with you, but I guess we're looking at revenue across the board, so I'm not ruling it out completely. My preference is that I like that Nantucket is sort of different in character than other places, but that's not to say that, in our lives we're not bombarded with ads every other day. So I
think if we do it properly, and again, we can go down, we can accept proposals, look at it, we can evaluate the financial as well as, the look and feel of it. And if we reject it, we reject it.
Yeah, I'd say I'm open, but I don't love the idea. It would be one personal.
Okay.
Ms. Planzer, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to explore, because we certainly can hold it to whatever standard we'd like it, but it'd be nice to know what it could be. What it might look like, what kind of revenue we're talking about. I think it's definitely worth exploring.
But I think also one of the objectives would be to gauge if, in fact, there is a business out there. We see in Hyannis a lot of real estate advertising, but they're not going to advertise that here because they live here. So it'd be interesting to see what, if any, market exists, and maybe what creativity is out there to come up with something that doesn't, look too disruptive or whatever.
If I may.
What would... It doesn't have to be big billboards. It can be, I've seen advertising that's really nice and interesting to look at. Might be an asset.
What would the form of the RFP be? I guess, what are we asking for? Or what are you thinking of asking for?
Typically, the way it would work is we would identify space that is available. What we would ask for, though, is creative and innovative ideas to convey the look and feel of the island while advertising, and see what, what ideas may be there.
I wouldn't necessarily pre-limit the space, certain spaces, because I think they need to come and explore the place and see what the opportunities are.
Right, but we have to at least identify the minimal,
I know we have to
so
give them
it's
a
all
level
the
playing
same,
field
and,
and all that stuff.
Right.
But we could give alternatives too and say any other suggestions are open. So, if somebody comes up with a very creative idea in a space that we didn't think, if it's something that we think is appealing, we could consider it.
School wanted to have an ad, and that'd be fabulous.
They could do a wall filled with shingles and then put a window there and make that the advertising or something. I don't know.
I think we need to listen. We don't have to take it, but we need to listen.
What I can do is I will prepare a draft RFP and circulate it to the commissioners for their comment.
That'd be great.
Okay. On the operations side, as I mentioned earlier, the town is looking at putting lifeguards on Nobodere Beach this summer. Working with them, they have a need for housing. These lifeguards, we have some room available in the Thompson House, and we'll be working closely with them on the monitoring and the rules that will be in place for monitoring the activity in that house so that we can preclude any previous events. The lifeguards currently have a very strict set of rules, and we're looking at adopting very much the same thing. So we're also working with Barnstable County, and I forget their technical name, but I call it the Office of Emergency Management. They're looking at a mass casualty exercise sometime late in June. It will be minimal disruption or interference to our operation. They are looking at a Tuesday or Wednesday, somewhere between 4 and 5, and what it will involve is a helicopter coming onto the island, remaining for about a half hour, and then returning to Air Station Cape Cod. The objective that they're trying to do is look at timing and number of patients that they could airlift off the island should we have a disaster. Very good discussion today. What it would involve is helicopters, if a real event happened, helicopters bringing in medical personnel, taking out patients. So the medical personnel would do the triage and things. The patients would be airlifted off and then to a staging area at the Cape and then sent to different hospitals. So they're working with Chief McDougal and the fire department, and they just wanted to touch base with us to see if they could at least do this to get it started. It works hand in glove with what we have to prepare for, which is our triennial exercise that will be coming up this fall. So we're going to involve them in our planning meetings as well and coordinate the efforts. So I think it'd be a major benefit to the island to be able to have a plan in place to be able to do significant airlift. And they were talking just with 2 helicopters, one trip, they could take 20 people. So we're going to work through that with Barnstable County. We've been working with town on some ATM articles relating to our IT equipment, our equipment purchases, and the appropriation, and I think we've worked those things through. I do want to mention another item. Through the state Mass DOT Aeronautics, there was an international art contest held, and through Nantucket Flying Association, Betsy St. Pierre, and the Nantucket New School, a number of applications were put in entrance from Nantucket, and one won first place in their category. It was Samuel Hoffert, and I believe it's his sister Eleanor Hoffert won third place in her age group. They are both now, their entries are now in Washington being evaluated on the national level and could potentially go to the international level over in Switzerland. So it's great news that, kids are starting to get them involved in the aviation. The theme was, what was it? Now I can't remember.
Rescue or something.
It was safety and
Safety.
and aviation.
Lives?
Saving lives, yes.
Saving lives, that's right.
Aviation saving lives, yes. Which is very appropriate for the island. So I think it's great that we're getting children involved, and we will be displaying the artwork in the terminal once we get it back. Just a couple of other items on the new FBO. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes work going on. Staff has reviewed the software. They've made a recommendation that they don't believe it's that we should be changing at this time. We have a very actually top-of-the-line software program, and they're going to work to do some tweaks with Ascent and some other folks. Working on the furnishings, Janine's been doing a lot of work with the window treatments, the televisions. The maintenance department's done a great job with the ticket counter, fixing the kitchen, testing radios. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes things operationally happening with the FBO.
If you haven't stopped in there recently, I suggest you do so, and it's not public yet, but the commission members, and take a look.
We also have, and I have not had a chance to review it yet, but I just want to make the commission aware that we have received our first special events request so far this year for May 16th, which I believe is associated with the Wine Festival, and I believe it's the one in Hangar 1. So, again, I haven't had a chance to review it yet. I'll go through that, and just want to make you aware of it. Next, I have the statistics.
Excuse me, before you do that, you want to mention your conversation with Priscilla Scott?
Oh, yes, I had discussion today with Priscilla Scott from the FAA regarding the passenger facility charge, and she informed me that by Friday of this week, she will have reviewed the draft and get back to us whether or not she needs additional information, has questions, or would like us to submit the final draft. When I discussed the time frame with her, I mentioned that we have a annual town meeting in early April, and I said, is there any chance that we will hear a decision by then? She said, absolutely. So that's her goal, to make sure she has it to us by the very beginning of April. And I've related that to the two airlines that were here for the master plan meeting as well.
And you will tell the FinCom that when we meet with them?
Yes, we meet with FinCom on March 4th. I believe it's 4:15 in Cyrus Pierce cafeteria. So, and that will be to present them with the amended budget where we remove the PFC, and I will update them as to where we stand with FAA on that.
And again, the idea is if we get the approval from the FAA prior to town meeting, we'll go in with as we discussed the last time, go in with a technical amendment which will restore the PFC to the income side and restore the fuel
The
purchase.
fuel,
If we
yes.
can do that, we still don't have that answer, whether we can have them in both, have it in both places, but hopefully that's what we'll be able to do. Okay.
Okay. On the statistics, before we start, I'd just like to say what I've done here. And it sounded easy, but it got very complicated quickly. I did convert the statistics from a calendar year to fiscal year, but I also did it for the full year 12-13. But in addition, I reformatted them so that they're a little more standardized. And you'll see where I'm talking here, where the months actually go across in each slide as opposed to across and down in one. So I'll take you through these, and I apologize. The noise ones are pretty basic, only because I just ran out of time. But NOAA does have a very detailed noise one that we'll probably do in a separate session. So as I said, I took here calendar year, or I'm sorry, fiscal year 12 versus 13 on the operations. And you can see, I can see, for the full calendar year, operations were up actually 5.77%. Can you go to the next one, Dave? Then what I did is I took the current fiscal year, year-to-date, and you can see, or they are January over January, the operations are down 19.8%. Year-to-date, they're down 7.45%. Again, as we mentioned before, operations were down, but the enplanements were not tracking similarly. So if we go on to the next slide, just kind of shows a chart here, and I guess what's important to pick out or look at here, December and January were very significant drops, and that was primarily because of weather. And you'll see that with the enplanements as well. On the enplanement side, again, fiscal year 12 over 13, we're up 0.82%, so essentially flat for the entire fiscal year. For year-to-date fiscal year, year-to-date fiscal year, we're up 1.27%, and that's even with a January that is down 23.53%. So you can see the storms really had a significant impact on the enplanements.
Well, it's interesting that the general aviation activity from January of 2013 to this, it was not down very much.
No, GA, because GA is very small, too.
Right, it's small, but it's still, it wasn't down by anything close to the same percentage as.
Well, and the shining star, if there is one here, is that while it's down a significant percent, it's one of our very slowest of months.
Right.
So percentage-wise, you know, it's telling a story. If you look at the chart, you will see essentially that August is where. Can you hit the next one, Dave? August is carrying quite a bit. We had a very significant increase in August, and then you can see the drop in November, December, which is primarily related to snow and weather. On the fuel sales, for Jet A, the fiscal year 2011 through 14, I show you that chart, and year-to-date, we're up 3.72%, but January, again, was down 17%. A lot of what this is showing is what we just heard in the master plan update, that the peak season is growing and the off-season is declining. And if you go to here's an interesting one. The chart showing the jet fuel. If you look at July, we were up significantly. In August, we were down slightly. You'll find when we get to the avgas that it was just the opposite. And the avgas correlates with passenger enplanements as well, because again, the 402s are primarily avgas. So on the avgas side, January over January, we're down 20%, big number, but year-to-date, we're down only 2.11%, which given the previous year being down for a full year, 15, if we can narrow that gap, that's what we're working on. And again, if you look at the graph, you'll see here where July avgas was down, but August was up. So August passengers and August avgas were up as opposed to July. Then we have the noise. The noise calls or complaints, you'll see January versus January are down 50%. And year-to-date, they're down 54%. There's an anomaly here that I want to point out, and that is in July of fiscal year 2013, which would actually be July of 2012, there were 96, and that's a very high number. But when I checked with Dave, what that is, we had asked, there was a group out on, what's the name of the road? Fulling Mill. We had asked them to document when the airplanes are coming over, and they came in with a list of the dates and times. So we put that in as actual complaints. So that's why that number is very high there. But again, I think it gave us a good starting point, and that was just when NOAA was starting to respond with, communicating with some of the residents and things. So, and the pie chart you'll see, as you would expect, the majority of our noise complaints are within the peak season. I have worked with the operations department on the APU monitoring, and I keep saying GPU, but it's APU, and getting that not only in the front of their mind, but in their procedures and in the status board, that type of thing too, so that they're continuously keeping an eye on and checking that. I want to get ready for this summer and make sure that everybody's aware of what we want to do and how we want to operate. So one last reminder on the last slide there, if you haven't heard, Nantucket was voted number 8 in top domestic airlines by TripAdvisor. They're
top domestic islands, not airlines, islands.
Islands, I'm sorry, islands. Which, considering we're behind a number of Hawaiian islands, it's not too bad. And just some reminders of important dates: Daffodil Weekend, Wine Festival, Memorial Day, Film Festival. 4th of July is a Friday this year. The Music Festival is new. And then we have Boston Pops and Labor Day. So just we are tracking these, we're looking at them, and we're also working on a plan for some events around, maybe associated with some of them, but also on the off times prior to season, or maybe in June when we have a lull between festivals and the actual beginning of the summer. So
Thank you.
that's my report.
Any questions? Any comments? Mr. Gasparo?
Perhaps I would be very interested to know what Priscilla at the FAA responds, if an update could be possible. I'm just,
Sure.
would be interested to hear.
She committed to getting back to me by Friday.
Yeah.
Whether or not it needs additional information, that the 200-page thing or whatever. She was primarily looking at, she said, the responses from the airline, or the responses we gave to the airlines' concerns that were issued.
And then my one other question is, you mentioned some vacancy in the Thompson House, so are we all set with seasonal staffing then? Are you already, if you know that we have...
We haven't finalized everything, My latest discussion, I'll find out tomorrow at staff meeting, but as of last week, I believe there were 2 individuals that were in need of housing for the seasonal. Again, that's where we are today.
Yeah.
I don't think we've finalized our staffing, but as I understand it, the house can comfortably handle 8, technically probably handle 10. So they're looking for 2 from lifeguards. If we only have 2 now, that's 4. We're only 50%, so we're comfortable that we can accommodate them.
Thank you. That was all.
And we have the advantage added advantage by having the lifeguards there of having enforcement by the chief.
We have a very rigid set of rules that will be enforced by a very rigid enforcer.
Ms. Planzer, do you have any questions or comments for Mr. Rafter?
I do not.
All right, thank you. I gather there are no subcommittee reports, commissioners' comments. Let me first say that the selectmen have accepted David Gray's resignation as a commissioner and have advertised the position to be filled with candidates to be interviewed, and the position apparently to be filled at the meeting on Wednesday, March 19th. I know of at least one person who has put in his form already. I believe there may be at least one other, and beyond that, I have no idea. Do you have any comments, Mr. Gasparo?
No.
Ms. Planzer?
No, that's all.
Is there public comment at this time? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to public session under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to threatened litigation with respect to the completion of the General Administration Building, or General Aviation Building. The chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the Airport Commission.
That is my motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo?
Aye.
The chair votes aye.